Oh, what a mess.
This is Neil Schneider from Meant to Be Seen. Welcome back to my messy basement. So we've got a wonderful show today. We've got an interview with Charlie Morrow. He's the founder of MorrowSound. He's one of the top audio experts in the world. He's got a huge interest in 360 audio, especially for virtual reality. We'll be hearing more from him later in the program. That said, I'd like to open up by talking about a new initiative that we're doing within the Immersive Technology Alliance. For those unfamiliar, I serve as Executive Director of the ITA, and the Alliance was founded as a nonprofit organization for the purposes of helping build viability for the immersive technology market. So what does viability mean? It means that we're living on, resources earned from customers and product sales rather than investment alone. And there's all kinds of things needed to make that happen. Now, this actually started in 2014. What happened was, something to be aware of. I live on the East Coast. Okay, so whenever there's an event, out west, it involves expensive travel. Whether it's Game Developers Conference or SVVR or VRLA or any major event, they tend to happen on the West Coast. And unfortunately, I don't get to go to all of them because it's an expensive endeavor to do so, as much as I'd like to. But nonetheless, my challenges, my problems were not unique to me. There's a lot of people, all over the world that, don't have that opportunity to go to these wonderful events. And, but a more important issue is that there's no reason for the market to be limited to one part of the world. If virtual reality, if augmented reality and immersive technology is going to take off in a big way, it really has to happen all over the place. It can't just be limited to one specific territory. So what we did as a proof of concept is in 2014 we launched Immersed. Okay, so this was hosted in Toronto in November 2014. Very successful program. We had wonderful speakers. John Gaeta came in from Lucasfilm. We had wonderful panel discussions. People showed their stuff. We're very proud of how that turned out. And, after Immersed, what happened was one of our sponsors said, what, this is such a wonderful show. We'd love to see this in Europe as well. And so Immersed Europe sprouted out in Murcia, Spain in 2015. Also in 2015, we had another edition of Immersed, also in Toronto, but this time we had a change of venue, the Ontario Science Centre. And for those unfamiliar, the Ontario Science Centre is easily one of Canada's largest education venues. I mean, they get thousands of visitors every day, perfect tie-in for the event. But the thing is that the nature of that relationship was, we were renting the space. I mean, we're just, we were effectively a vendor, to the advantage of the space of the Ontario Science Centre, and they were tremendous. But, that's as far as the relationship went. And what happened was, we gave the Science Center, a few passes because we wanted them to experience Immersed. We wanted them to appreciate, why we are so excited about virtual reality and augmented reality and immersive technology. Well, what happened was, and we're very proud of this, is the CEO of the Ontario Science Centre, he paid Immersed a visit, and he's like, holy cow, this is something that we should, completely get behind. I mean, this is, you've got a wonderful event here, top speakers, the technology is amazing. This is exactly what the Ontario Science Centre is about. So what we're doing this year is we're still going to have Immersed, of course, we're still going to have Immersed 2016 at the Ontario Science Centre. I mean, it's going to be the same, it's going to be a professional conference. Imagine you go into the lobby, you go up the escalators, there's a professional business-to-business exhibit hall. Then next door, you have the professional training and the discussions and so on. So, and of course, for meals and so on, we have networking receptions. We have this wonderful formula that we've been using for years now. We're going to stick to it. Everyone's been happy with it. I mean, the feedback we continually get from delegates is they always meet the right people at Immersed events. If it's not broken, don't fix it. So we're going to continue with that model. However, we're also going to do something, I think, radically different. So one of the, the whole reason we did Immersed in the first place was we identified a problem. We identified, a gap in the market, and so we took steps to fill it. So here's the current gap as we see it. I don't know if everyone will agree, but I'm going to express it, is that we've done, the industry, and when I say the industry, I mean virtual reality, augmented reality, and so on. We've done a wonderful job reaching out to the enthusiast community. Okay, so if you look at the meetups and the conferences, if it's not the professionals going or the content creators going, the next group that's in attendance are people that have call it a personal interest. They recognize where things are headed with virtual and immersive tech, and they want to be part of this movement. And they're a very vibrant, very enthusiastic community. So which is great. I mean, even in the 3D days, we needed those early adopters, to help promote, help, deliver that, the success of the technology. So we very much are counting on that enthusiast community to, to continue, to promote immersive technology and share that excitement. But what we are lacking is, even if we look at how the media has been covering immersive technology, it's mostly the technology journals that promote it, the specialized blogs that promote it. Everyday people, they don't necessarily have that same familiarity with virtual reality and immersive technology. They're just not exposed to it the same way that enthusiasts are. So we're going to change all that. I mean, we want to do something completely brand new with Immersed 2016 that we are adequately reaching, what I'll say are like future consumers, future customers, people that very well should take a direct interest in immersive technology because it will be impacting their day-to-day life. And so here we are. So what we're doing with the Ontario Science Centre is they have a completely separate space in the museum. It's actually on the other side of the museum, and up to 20,000 square feet. Okay, so just to put this in perspective, the first Immersed, event was maybe 2,000 square feet. Immersed Europe and Immersive Spain was about 4,000 square feet. 20,000 square feet to have that access is very helpful, because one of the other challenges that's happened within the last year is that originally virtual reality was strictly a seated experience. Okay, with the introduction of the HTC Vive, now the basic setup could be anywhere from 12 feet by 12 feet to 15 by 15 feet. So to effectively show virtual reality, requires a lot of space. So, suddenly now we have that space. So when, and the vision here is that when, people come to visit the museum, they go downstairs, it's an exhibition as part of the museum experience, and everywhere they look, there should be immersive technology to see. I would be really happy if there were no lineups. And the reason that there's no lineups is there's just so much to see. They go, oh, this exhibit's, being used. I'm going to go to the next one. That's what I'd like to see happen. And I want people just so excited by what they see and what they experience. But we need more. We need to, it's not just about showing the technology. So the other thing we'd like to see happen is we'd like to see a public education experience. So imagine, if you will, so we've got this, this show hall. Okay, so we have up to 20,000 square feet to use in there. Outside that space, we have another wide area that everything could be customized. Okay, so we could fill it with benches and chairs, and we'll have a custom stage, and we want people to be excited, not just about the technology, but the science behind the technology. There's all kinds of things that we could do. There's all kinds of things that we will do. We want the public excited. So who do we want participating with this? Well, the Science Center gets about 3,000 to 5,000 visitors a day. Okay? So, you know, we want teachers, we want students, we want, teenagers, we want adults. Everyone's qualified. There's, the age limit we're looking at is 12 years and older. We obviously, because there's certain recommendations as to who's qualified to use the technology. But other than that, we want this to be a memorable, experience. We want people excited about immersive technology, and we want to reach people well outside the enthusiast community. I mean, we've got So when is Immersed taking place? Immersed 2016. Well, it takes place October 16th to 18th. And now, ideally, what's going to happen is, well, it's not ideally, it is going to happen, so Sunday is going to be the public day. So, and when I say public day, I mean, for the museum attendees, they go into the Science Center, they buy their Science Center ticket, and then they can, enjoy the Science Center and this special exhibition. Monday, we want it to appeal to schools, high schools and educational institutions. So, we would be really happy if teachers and students are bused down to the Science Center for field trips. I mean, there's all kinds of things we can do. We want to make it happen. Now, for professionals, it's still going to be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Sunday is going to be the, call it professional training, so technical training. And then Monday, Tuesday will be the main conference days. So networking receptions, panel discussions, everything applicable to industry growth and, of course, meeting the right people. So that's where we are with Immersed 2016. There's a lot to announce, okay? But just a heads up, we're lining up some celebrity moderators for the panel discussion. So the first announcement is AJ Fry. AJ Fry is the co-host of Inner Space, which is on the Space Channel. So it's a national science fiction, channel that's aired, right across Canada. And, we have a history when it comes to Immersed with attracting the right, media to participate. So there's a lot of exciting stuff in the works. So anyway, I've shared quite a bit here. So if you want to participate, and I hope you do, please visit getimmersed.com. We have a special program, for early startups and pre-funded companies. We want your involvement to be as affordable as possible. And look, I think this is going to make a huge difference for the immersive technology market. And, there's going to be other opportunities that stem from this. This is just a really solid start. So anyway, so after this, we've got our interview with Charlie Morrow, founder of MorrowSound. Welcome back to the basement. To my immediate left is Charlie Morrow. He is composer and sound engineer at MorrowSound. Welcome to the program, Charlie.
It's nice to be with you. It's quite a connection we have between Toronto and downtown Helsinki, Finland.
Helsinki. It's a long distance call. It's a good thing we have this thing, what we call the internet. It's so easy to take for granted these days. Charlie, if I may say, you've got a really wide and varied career. If I open this up and ask you to tell us about yourself, I really don't know what I'm going to get because there's so much to talk about. So why don't we just open up with that question? Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm a lover of sound, and because I've loved sound and been interested in it all my life, I've been able to work with it as a composer, as a sound designer, as a explorer of immersive sound experiences from prehistory to the future. So that's been my adventure, and I'm delighted to share it with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, why don't we talk about, your involvement in the audio business? Am I correct that, Paul Simon got you into the business? What's the story there?
Well, he and Art Garfunkel had a group, originally Tom and Jerry, and then Simon and Garfunkel. Garfunkel was my classmate at Columbia College in New York, and I was asked to help with the what became the Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme album.
And like, what happened? Like, what was his influence on you?
Well, he had asked me to think about what instruments other than the guitar. I mean, these were singers and like folk singers with a guitar, little experience with musical instruments, and my job was to come up with interesting musical instruments that might blend well with the guitar and the spirit of their songs. And so I came up with, harpsichord and similar keyboard instruments and little bells that all seem to fill out the picture beyond the voice and the guitar.
Okay, great stuff. Now so go ahead.
I was going to say that led me to the recording studio. I'd always been involved with studios, but I'd never seen anything like the studios that Columbia Records had in New York at the time. And my father once accused me of being vaccinated by a phonograph needle, but it's more like being vaccinated by the studio. And that led inextricably to a lifetime of the same.
Now, I'm sure, most of our viewers, myself included, okay, wouldn't have been, privy at the time. But, just to show how outlandish and varied your career has been, I'd be interested to hear, what you've done with animals and audio and how it relates to Richard Nixon.
Well, that's a fantastic story. I don't know where to begin, but I had been exploring communication through music and sound with animals, and discovered that I could get into dialogue with certain kinds of creatures, particularly like field frogs, and we discovered through our research with the Rhode Island Oceanographic Institute scientists that fish make sound, and that fish could be communicated with through dialoguing back and forth, making the sound that they were making back to them. So we put up a sound system with microphones. We had at the time a group called the New Wilderness Preservation Band, and we went out on a yacht called the Unicorn. Captain John Doswell, may he rest in peace, took us out there, and as it turned out, we announced through our press agent that we're going to give a concert for fish. Well, who could have imagined? I mean, this was done, of course, weeks in advance, if not longer, that the night before our August event, that Richard Nixon would resign. And the next morning, before Ford was sworn in, we were out there doing our concert for fish, and everything that was press was out there at our boat site. They were in their boats. Gabe Pressman was there. There were many others from both from the electronic media and the papers, and we became a press item. And so, if it wasn't for the animals and the changes of history around President Nixon, who knows what the story might be.
Now, you've done, I had to open with that. I mean, I just think it's such a great story. Now, you've actually done work in film as well. Maybe you could talk about some of the big movies you've worked on.
Well, I guess the first big movie that I worked on is called Moonwalk One. It was for the great filmmaker Francis Thompson, and Theo Kamaki was the director of it. And this was these folks were famous for the first really large screen film. So eventually there would be IMAX coming out of the very Thompson shop in New York City, and that association would in fact make my career in media. And so scoring this film for NASA, it was a 70 millimeter film, and because it was a tight budget, okay, Morrow, you can do music, you can do sound effects. I wound up doing everything that was sound for the project, and I had a chance to work very closely with the editors, so it was both an education and an opportunity to be expressive, and also to learn some limits. One of my favorite stories was that the scene with space medicine seemed, in fact, very comic, and I put some rather strange and funny sound effects in there. And the guys from NASA absolutely hit the ceiling and didn't think it was funny at all. So I had to rescore the space medicine scene. But that was the first really big film that I worked on. It was reissued recently in honor of the first moon landing by BBC, and is available on DVD. It's later on I worked on a film called Altered States. John Carigliano was my classmate, so I had some good classmates: Brian De Palma, John Carigliano, Art Garfunkel at Columbia College in New York, and John asked me to create music using ocarinas. I explored from animal sounds the sound of lots of similar instruments, and lots of ocarinas make a wonderful chorus. And we created scenes for that movie, Altered States, a psychedelic scene in Mexico that was just out of this world. It's an extraordinary Paddy Chayefsky film, and I don't think there have been moments, too many moments like that in my film career.
So you've been, since then you've spanned well outside cinema, and from my understanding, a big part of your work is audio experience. I hope I'm getting the wording right. Can you tell us about some of the stuff that you're currently doing? Well,
my current work has been with Immersive Sound for both for both AR and VR, we developed an interest in immersive sound because we'd been event makers. I'd been making giant events, city-size events. One of the largest was on the summer solstice every year for the city of New York. And recently we captured the spirit of that event and did a 24-hour, 24 time zone broadcast, webcast, which we'll repeat every year. And it was just this last June. So that was a major experience to tie together the world of art, science, and design. Part of the immersive sound experience, though, as an event maker, was to be able to fill a space so that you'd believe you were actually someplace specifically designed, and a kind of a transfer of your belief to where you are. I'm in such a space here now. I have a 3D sound system here, MorrowSound 8.1 system, but we've done giant systems in Barcelona. We had 96 speakers, and well, it's evolved at a point where we can create this kind of effect both in a room and then taking the software and shrinking it down, create it in your head. Not that what happens in a room isn't in your head, but that one fact alone is the secret of it, because since your brain synthesizes all this sound and you believe you're someplace and you're having a designed experience, making that happen through headphones and work with with an Oculus or other haptic device is very easy, because with the way our system is designed, we just shrink the cube down and make it move with your head. So that conversion from AR to VR is kind of a nice bonus of our system.
Okay, good stuff. Just so you know, the audio is coming through. You're a little choppy there, so we're getting a little bit of a Max Headroom effect, but that's okay. You're back to normal. So this whole immersive experience here. So let's talk. You talked about it a little bit as far as immersive audio, but let's just define that. So what do you mean by immersive audio? Like, how, from your point of view as a professional, what would be a crowning achievement from an immersive audio point of view?
Well, I would say that the large public events that I did, like Copenhagen with boats and planes and 2,000 performers for radio and television, that was a totally immersive event in every way. And then learning how to create something like that, an event-like experience, led to doing a floor-up experience. The secret of our work is that, when you're an infant, you're crawling around on the ground and you hear everything out your ears as you peer around and learn to find your way in the world. And as you stand up, the ground is still important. And all the other audio systems that are out there purporting to be immersive, stop at ear level. And we found that the ear level area, which is left over from stereo, is really another matter, because ear level grabs your foreground attention and doesn't let you fully enter the physically virtual space around you. So I would say the crowning achievement was being able to create from the floor up and make the walls and the ceiling disappear, so that you're basically and fundamentally in another environment, but all the way from the floor up, so that if you roll around on the floor or you climb up on a ladder, you're still in that virtual space. And that is what really works for me. The other piece of it is quite interesting. Historically, most of the sound work that's been done has been done with ambisonics, and ambisonics is based on altering sound in much, let's say, analogous way to rectilinear 3D visual experience. Both of them mess with your brain. And so I suffer from motion sickness as well as hyperactivity, as you might gather from my restlessness here. And I wanted to find a way to have sound be healthy. And I found the way to do it was not to work with ambisonics, which is the standard of the business now. But by skipping the ambisonics, we're able to get a great deal more detail. We'll be able to create low, almost negligible latency, so that if you put sound live through one of the MorrowSound systems, it comes out as you speak. It comes out as you do it. So it's got a crystal clear environment in which there is no latency and no sense of a kind of cloud of something that you don't quite understand, which is messing with your head. So the idea is to make it feel totally like a natural fit, as natural as swimming underwater.
So let's, why don't we touch on that shortly, because I think that's very much the core of your product right now. Ambisonics, am I pronouncing that properly?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Now, when it comes to designing like public spaces, from what I understand, it could be pretty, I don't want to use the word mundane, but I mean like the audio design is in places where we don't even think they're placed. I mean, can you talk about some of the things we experience every day where a lot of thought was put into the audio design that we may not even realize it?
Well, you're absolutely right. I would say that one of the most extraordinary contributions of our ancestors was a full awareness of the way a whole space worked. I mean, in the there's been some interesting articles written about how the cave drawings in France were part of ceremonies with music, and that the experience itself of being in the cave and the music and the language was all wrapped together. And I think that this whole idea of a thoughtful selection of a place is really important. And that as we build cities and build cultures, different places have had different degrees of awareness of how the space should feel. I mean, visually you have some, it's a little more obvious. I mean, for example, there have been architects, for example, who have built places where the entrance is very small, and then the next area is a little bigger, and then finally you're in a giant room, so you have an accelerated wow as you walk through that space. So your experience is designed to expand. A lot of that same kind of thing happens with audio. The concert halls of the past were designed often by families that handed down the secret from generation to generation. And that became an important issue. I mean, much the way, say, cities are designed often with the way the sun comes through the streets, and the relationship to the natural environment is part of the overall design. And I think that the more that you look beneath the surface of city design and house design and so forth, there's more and more of a kind of a history of different mentalities towards sound. In the most recent work, though, it's quite interesting because as we become specialized, there's quite a lot of very attractive physical spaces with terrible acoustics. In fact, there's a classic book was written in the 90s called Deaf Architects and Blind Acousticians, which is a sort of a nasty book about how people get stuck in the corner of expertise and have blinders or whatever plugs in their ears. So in daily life, people are starting to be aware more through the negative effects of sound than through the positive effects. There's been a lot of studies done about how noise, say airport noise or noise in general, affects classroom And there are studies of how students learn a half a year or even a full year slower in really noisy places. And so noise has been a big has probably been the more prominent side of the discussion of sound and thoughtless use of sound, and now the interest in controlling sound. I mean, in product design, there's long been interest in sound. For example, the Harley-Davidson motorcycle actually has patented their sound, and so that's a big part of the experience. And little things like the button on an elevator, just making a sound that associates with elevators, because there doesn't have to be one, or even the stories about electric cars that need to have a sound added to them so that you feel like you're driving and so someone doesn't get run over. So there's lots and lots of negative reaction to sound that's leading to laws and rules and interest in getting sound to be less noise ridden, and at the same time the expansion of sound as doors into other universes. Certainly with the internet and with new media, there's more people working with sound now than I think ever. I mean, when it became possible to create and work with sound as a non-trained musician, the door just opened up brilliantly for people to begin to associate sound and space and design. So I'd say, the more the tools are available and the more knowledge is shared, the more interesting the environment becomes sonically.
Well, I'll share with you a quick story, and I think it relates. I'm from Montreal originally, and in Montreal we have the Metro system. It's like, the Francophone equivalent of the subway. And, those subways have been running, I think, since the 60s, and they have this signature sound that the motors make when they rev up. It's like, dun-dun-dun. It's like these three tones that you hear, and you know that the subway's moving. So a friend of mine told me the other day that they're actually modernizing those subway trains. So they're being updated with new engines and the whole thing. And what I heard, maybe this is hearsay, but what I heard is that those engines don't make that noise anymore. So what they're doing is they're adding an extra feature to put out those tones when the engines wouldn't naturally put out those tones, so that there's still that familiarity in the Metro system, that they don't want to lose that, that function that, everyone's grown so used to in the Montreal subway system.
That's a lovely story. I think it is absolutely true. And, the idea of iconic sounds is important as far as people's awareness, whether it's Big Ben in London or the subway sound or whatnot, or the church bell or the factory whistle, or each of these, are defining iconic sounds, and quite interesting because they take on a much larger role than they might otherwise have.
So let's go back to the topic of virtual reality and augmented reality and immersive technology. So you talked about ambisonics. Maybe, for those who are unfamiliar, can you talk about, MorrowSound? What's your core deliverable right now? What are you doing in the immersive VR space, and why is it so important?
Well, we have been working more in the AR space recently, because we've been installing in hospitals, high elevators, and just the field of extraordinary AR use of sound has become a very good area of business for us in Europe and in North America. We have moved our technology into virtual reality, and we're exploring, a variety of uses for it. We have designed a chair for it. The designer, Harry Kuskinen, who's here, designed a VR chair, which I'll send you, the chair so you could put it into the show. And it hangs and you float in space. So I've been looking, as VR headgear is getting better and better, ways of making a robust, repeatable experience. So we have a show coming up here at the Finnish Science Museum, Heureka, where we will have a variety of different headsets, but using our floating chair. So we're concentrating in a way on a venue in which you'd be able to experience VR with our sound, where our sound will really count because you're in a really interesting and good place. We haven't gone into games or the home market because we're more geared as a business towards business to business arrangements and the health field and education. So in this area, this is where we've concentrated our efforts. But I think you'll see us moving in the next year towards a variety of experiences that use the fact that when you turn your head, the sound world moves with you, and because it uses our sense of place, our strong atmosphere, and because it is not ambisonic, it has a completely different feeling. So that you would say, take the discrete sound and with all the head transfer data that isn't coming from a Unity engine or such, any of the game engines that create specific sounds coming from locations. And then we create kind of a broth in which all of that can live. But the broth gives you the strong sense of a location. And so it's the marriage of our broth with these, point sound stew ingredients that, we see as a kind of our unique position in the business currently.
So you'll forgive me. I don't understand, what is ambisonic? Like, what is it? What's the alternative to ambisonic? Why is this so important?
Well, ambisonics is important because it is...
Rewind. What does it mean? What is it?
Ambisonic is a name given to an audio technique in England by its inventor. And it is a way of using multiple speakers and recording sound from multiple speakers in order to create a spatial effect. Okay,
so I think I understand. So it's a means of recording like multiple audio sources. Is that not? Or
yes.
Multiple streams of audio, I should say. Is that right? Try again.
Multiple streams of audio and then projecting it. It's a means of recording multiple streams of audio and projecting it back to create the impression of the original space in which it was recorded.
Okay. And what's the alternative to ambisonic? Like, what makes this unique compared to, other solutions, or is it the same as other solutions?
Well, it's not the same as other solution. It is just itself. And there are different ways that ambisonics and its math are used to create 3D sound. And that is the standard of the VR sound business right now. Most of these systems every system that's in use now is in fact an ambisonic type system.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. So what does MorrowSound do? Like, you're using ambisonics. Like, how, I understand you're doing 360 audio. Like, what makes your work unique compared to, other products and other technologies out there?
The fact that we don't use ambisonics.
Ah, see, I got it in reverse. I'm talking ambisonics as this great, wonderful thing, which maybe it is, but you're doing an alternative. I misunderstood.
And ambisonics is the historic first effort in 3D sound. Then as it has evolved and come into the VR business, simultaneously we began to work in a completely different way for AR. And our AR work has skipped using ambisonics. We did initially, but we found that it has artifacts in it that mess with people's heads. And I personally don't care for the way it sounds. It's got a strange way of handling, particularly echo and reverb, which is in fact what the world is made of. I mean, you detect the space you're in by the way your voice bounces around, your footsteps bounce around. You think about how a blind person taps a cane and sees with their ears. And I find that the way that happens in the natural world is different from ambisonics. And I've set about creating a system that sounds like the natural world. And that's the difference between what we do and ambisonics. I'd like to think that, we're the automobile to their horseless carriage.
So is there a name? I mean, of course, it's a MorrowSound product, but is there a name for the type of technology that you're using or a class of the technology, or is it standing on its own right now?
It's standing on its own right now. for want of, we have called it things like true 3D and new 3D, but since the business abounds with that, we tended not to use 3D as much as we did when we were one of the few guys on the block. I think immersive sound is more or less the most attractive language. People want immersive sound, so when they want it for hospitals, when they want it for workplaces, it's the fact that our sound is immersive that makes it interesting, and the fact that it's from the floor to the ceiling, which is quite different from the way other 3D sound systems work. In that most of our systems are not in what you call a proscenium or frontal experience. You think about it, a rock concert, a movie, a concert hall, they're all frontal. And most of the sound work that's been done has been done for a frontal experience, and definitely an Oculus or a VR headset is a frontal experience. And we've been concerning ourselves coming out of events with things that don't have a left and a right, and a front and a back, because you're in a whole world which possesses those qualities. So we've designed for a non-proscenium experience, and therefore we've been able, one of the reasons we avoided ambisonics is because in the lower level ambisonics, there's very few good seats in the house. I mean, with a headset like an Oculus, you avoid that problem because your head is the one good seat in the house. But in larger installations, that kind of sound is very problematic in large spaces. So recently, one of our great successes is putting sound into planetariums, because in a planetarium, we can bring the sound right down to the level of the floor. And therefore, a person, let's say, who's at a planetarium show can have the sense of, little critters running around their feet on the floor, or marble rolling past them. The floor becomes part of their experience, and suddenly the mind is entranced. The entrancement is, I think, a big part of immersive sound, that entrancement, the magical hypnosis that takes place that makes you believe that you are someplace.
So this sounds really exciting. Is this something that, people could try today? Is it something that they could code for today? Where are things at?
Where things are at is that it's still in-house, and we're going to have it in shows starting with the autumn and moving into the next year, because we'd like to present it with the full experience of our floating chair, and then we'll pull it out into other products. But we are concentrating on totally controlled playback situations, which is more like, it's the exhibitor mentality, and it comes, from our pride in being able to totally control the experience that people are having. We'll be ready to cut it loose, I think, sometime in the next year, so that people can do it more on their own and in their own space. But we're just getting more experience in controlled environments.
And who's this going to be most applicable for?
Well, it'll be applicable for every area of VR that you could think of. I mean, our primary interest is in education and in health. We haven't teamed up with the game company, but we would be a perfect mate for any game that's out there, because you'd have an even richer experience. We have put a sound system, an entrance experience into Supercell in San Francisco, and we see games as being an extraordinary area for us because of our ability to create this strong sense of place, which I think will add to gaming another level. But also it's part of hearing aids, what we do, part of phones, part of conferencing. Our applications are to every area that sound is being done, because we've mastered it for 1 year and for 2 years, as well as for the room.
Okay, wonderful. So one more question for you before we end this interview. You're always wearing that hat. Is there a story behind that hat?
There is. I'm so glad you asked. My dad and I, over the course of our years together, never got to spend the kind of time together that we would have liked. He was away in service when I was born, and left a month after I was born, and came home a couple of years later, and was it was a long time before we actually got to hang out. And unfortunately, it was when he was dying of cancer. And we had such an extraordinary connection in those last months of his life that when he passed, I went up into the attic of our family house in Passaic, New Jersey, and looked for something to remember my dad by. And I found a box, and in it was a bowler hat. And it had his initials, JLM, Joseph Lloyd Morrow. And by the way, he got a medical surgical degree in Montreal. And I've been wearing this hat ever since. It's not the same one because I lose things and things wear out, but that's the story. It's a connection to my dad.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Charlie.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to seeing you all in person.
At Immersed. All right.
You at Immersed.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Charlie. This is Neil Schneider in the basement. Back with more right after this. Thank you for visiting my messy basement. We are always looking for interesting guests to appear on the show, so send an email to neilsmessybasement@mtbs3d.com if you want to be on the program. Also, check out www.getimmersed.com. There is only one Immersed, and we want everyone to be part of it, whether you're interested in VR, whether you want to show VR, if you want to speak at the program. Again, it takes place October 16th to 18th at the Ontario Science Centre. We really want this to be something else for everyone involved. So again, check out getimmersed.com. We're looking forward to hearing from you. On that note, we'll talk again next week.